Welcome, Jean and Diana. Thank you so much for being here with us and for presenting your workshop next Saturday. We'd love to hear more about what the topic is and what you plan on providing the community.
We're really excited to do a workshop for everybody on self-led eating and well-being in stressful times because God knows these are stressful times. And also, this time of year, it always seems to be the time when all of our managers are gearing up to do something better, right? To get us together, improve things. A lot of times that's around how we can improve our eating and our exercise habits. And so this is a really good time to do this workshop in general. But in addition, the past year has kind of brought these struggles right to the center stage for most of us, right? And a lot of the dynamics that we see when we get into a diet mind are the things that we've seen flare up during this pandemic and the political crisis.
I think you're absolutely right, Jean. There has been so much uncertainty in this year, and that uncertainty, my clients and all of us, including myself, were fraught with the unknowing, the
Yeah,
uncertainty, which then leads to more anxiety. And the more anxiety we have, the more we're looking toward the ways that we used to cope and be able to take care of those that we're not able to right now, because so many
right.
of us are isolated and we don't have the resources that we used to have. And so our internal system is resorting to ways that it used to and historically could turn to food or could turn to any type of behaviors, binge watching TV, or alcohol is consumption is higher. That it was curious to me that liquor stores were essential workers, and because that was our coping mechanism in the beginning. It was really hard. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Right. Right. Well, especially at the beginning when we were first shocked by this, all of our routines got disrupted. And then all of this scarcity mentality, right? Would there be enough food? Would there be enough flour? You couldn't get a bag of flour anywhere,
Right.
right? So all of a sudden, all of our managers, are trying to get some control, and our firefighters are going out snatching up all the toilet paper, buying up all the available flour that there is. You couldn't get yeast online, right? But all of those things to make the food that is super comforting, right?
Right.
So on one hand, we're doing what we can to get grounded, get connected in a lot of tradition, making sourdough bread, homemade pasta, things like that. And then our firefighters are out buying that kind of thing, and then our managers are buying the Pelotons, right?
Mhm.
So the stock of the Pelotons went up, just as much as the snack food.
That's right. That's right. And then I think as we moved through that and we got over the scarcity and things started settling down a little bit, I think then it became just really challenging to stay at that level, to stay in your home or to only have outdoor activity available to you. And, to what Jean was saying, Pelotons were on back order. No one could get hand weights. People were
Right,
trying to set up their home gyms and so finally that even happened, but there was still that strong level of fatigue of homeschooling children and working from home for a lot of people, and then the population that doesn't have that available, that had to go to work and didn't have childcare.
right,
It's so hard on the systems, and how do people take care of themselves in the time of unrest.
right. And I just want to speak, to that point where what we were watching were who had to go to work, who got to stay at home, right? What resources were available to people. For all of us, a lot of the deprivation that gets kicked up around dieting, like I won't have enough, the fear of deprivation, the actual deprivation, and then the fear of excess, right? I'm going to go to excess. So we were seeing that as people are at home with no structure, with no, constant access to food, and then this backlash of, oh, now my body's changing. I've got the COVID-19. I need to do something. But
Mhm.
this is all on the backdrop of watching, we're all noticing parts of ourselves, or most of us, I would imagine, that are scared, uncertain, don't know what's going to happen in the world. And then we're watching as different people, in other groups are having to deal with, racism, deep financial insecurity, actual, not knowing what they're going to do, not being homeless, things like that. So, we're kind of seeing that in external systems um, around us, and that's amping up parts who want to get grounded in some way, want to feel some sense of security.
Mhm.
And hopefully, what it does too is it allows us all a chance to consider, because now it's really close to our experience, right? We're no longer separate from it. Those of us who have a lot of privilege, we can really see what happens when you are in and plunged into an environment where you're feeling so much fear about so many things, and the resources that you used to have are no longer there. Even the resources of time and space,
Mhm.
time and space, being able to go out and get things. Um,
Mhm.
so, whether it's parenting at home or having elderly parents that you now have to scramble to try to figure out what to do with or can't have any contact with, I think it gives a lot of us more empathy potentially and compassion for what it's like for people who have to live with these kinds of threats to their well-being and their security on a daily basis, and to consider how that impacts their bodies. Because there's been, in addition to all the other stressors, if you just read the paper, there's all of these headlines about what weight does to your experience of COVID, what diabetes, obesity, what people are calling, obesity, does to your bodies. So
That added a level of fear, at least in my clients that live in larger bodies. They were asking me to help them determine if that was really accurate, that, the headlines, as Jean said, were like obesity increases your risk of not COVID per se, but your ability to heal from that, and it makes your treatment harder. And and it was just really challenging to meet them where they were in their own fears around, what if I get it, and will I be able to get over it if I do get it? Some clients are thrust into now needing to prepare food for themselves, and they're not used to that. They're used to going out quite a bit or picking things up on the way home from work, and that's been a real big challenge for a lot.
I'm really finding that a lot of these challenges are really kicking up a lot of shame for folks. And that one of the most powerful things about the IFS model is how shame lifting it can be, just even in being with the shame of
Right.
like, everybody thinks they have to do this perfectly, they have to make progress, they have to take care of themselves, but when they can't, all of the
right.
problems that come up around not being able to do that. So I
Mhm.
just wanted you
Right.
both to speak to how powerful the IFS model can be with eating issues and pointing folks towards self.
We're all supposed to learn a language, right? Run a marathon. We're supposed to be doing something during this pandemic, right? And then often finding that we're having a really hard time and feeling lots of shame about not meeting those goals or eating in a way that other parts of us are judging, or maybe our bodies are changing, right? Because we're not as active as we usually are. And then, there's a lot of shame that we take on from the time we're so little that makes us doubt. We start to disconnect from what our bodies are telling us they need and what feels good to us and right to us, and not just our bodies, but we're not just bodies, right? We are our bodies are the home for our parts, but we also have lots of different thoughts and feelings that are needing our care, not just our physical well-being. And really, what self-led eating and well-being does is really helps people reconnect with, what do parts of me need right now in this moment, and helping the parts who judge or the parts who react to other people's judgment to help them step back a bit, so we can have that connection and have more of a trust that we know what we need when we can get our parts to step back.
And understanding that these parts of us that we view as critical or judging or punitive in some way inside of us, that we can actually meet them with a different, we can meet them in a different mindset, which is self energy. Because if we're meeting them from another part, we get really trapped into the polarity of, everybody knows what that battle is inside of us. I should and I shouldn't. So the self-led eating and wellness allows us to be more compassionate, but even
Mhm,
at least more welcoming or more open, maybe more
mhm,
forgiving when we can help clients see their positive intention, how
mhm.
hard they're working to try to keep them from feeling the fears of what's going on outside, or eating to cope with what's happening with aging parents in other parts of the world that we can't do anything about, and losing people and we can't go to their funeral. And it's
Right.
understanding that if you have a binge eating part, it's doing that with the utmost intention for your well-being.
Mhm.
And that helps soften a little bit the anger toward, let's say, or the frustration toward the binge eating part of us, because now we know at least it's trying really hard to help, and we can offer it another way of looking at things.
Mhm. Right, and a lot of times it has been helpful, right? It has been helpful for people to soothe here and there with food,
Right.
right?
And there are plenty of other reasons besides physical hunger that we eat, and we
Mhm.
honor that, we respect that,
Right.
and that allows the entire system to be a little bit softer as we approach the the parts with love and compassion.
Right, because the truth is that a lot of ritual and um, connection involves food,
Yeah.
right? So a lot of what we saw in the media was around recipe sharing, you know, getting into baking, uh, not competitions, but kind of people sharing the recipes and sharing what they're the creativity and what they're doing with food, things like that. But one of the things I think that's also true is that when you become more self-led about your eating and what's going on with your body, you also really get that on a day-to-day basis. Parts of you are going to need different things, and that it takes effort to take care of our bodies. And for some people in this pandemic, having to cook all the time has really ratcheted up their stress monumentally. Some
Mhm.
people really hate cooking, and then to not be able to go out and get something that you feel good about is extremely stressful. Or it's, with kids who don't do as well when they don't have as much of that. It's just gets, so many sources of stress. And so what we try to talk to people about is, what works best for you, what works best for your family, and checking in with what parts start to look outside and say, oh, I should be doing this. Right, I should be cooking more, I should like cooking more. When if you don't like cooking, then considering what can we do for your parts? How can we help you develop a practice, a self-led eating practice that involves taking that into consideration and not judging yourself because you're not doing it in the way it should be done.
Could you guys give us a rundown of the workshop and what people can expect from coming?
In the 3 hours that we have, which of course doesn't feel like enough time even before we start, but basically to help people reflect on the ways in which they get disconnected from their core wisdom about what their bodies need, all the different messages they get, and from all these different systems, be it parents or the larger culture, start to really look at that disconnection and maybe get a sense of some of their own parts that hold some of these heavy duty burdens and the polarizations that result from carrying those burdens. We do feel very strongly about the fact that the more that we each become sensitive parts detectors in our sessions for people around eating and bodies, it's so easy because we're all immersed in this biased culture that we can miss a lot of trailheads that come up. Things that, people complaining about their bodies or complaining about weight gain, not just weight gain, about how much they're moving, things like that, how their clothes fit, with that we might actually just let go by and not even make any kind of express any curiosity about. But if we can draw some attention to how we as providers help our clients become aware of the trailheads that are emerging, so that because they're often very rich portals into parts that really could use our help. So really looking at how do some of the biases you've taken on influence what you notice in sessions, what you respond to in sessions. It's hard to talk about a lot of these issues for people openly, right? There are parts who come up who have feelings about um, raising them, and also just what kind of automatic assumptions do we make about why people are depressed and anxious? That's also important. What ideas do we have about people in all different kinds of bodies to really start to look at that? All of the bias our culture puts on bodies in terms of size, shape, sexuality, all kinds of appearance, function. So we wanted to talk a little bit about that.
Is there going to be time for kind of experiential going inward exercises, or is it mostly going to be didactic?
My understanding, we're going to have experiential exercises through meditations, and
It's really incredible to have both of you, Jean, just having so much experience with food issues and even, when things get super polarized with eating disorders, and then Diana, for you to be a dietitian and to have both sides of that coin addressed at the same time
Mhm.
is it's incredible. It's actually really I find unusual to even just find a training as a clinician where both of those sides are together. So I feel really lucky that we have both of you doing this training.
The internalized experience is the most important of this. It's that we can't teach these skills from the top down, from a managerial place down, because that's not how the system manifests and that's not how it actually works. It's more from inside of us. And so we do want to offer, you know, at least a couple, I think we have on the agenda to let people feel their parts, find their parts, feel their parts, notice their parts, maybe chat with their parts for a moment if they can. And I find that works really well on the Zoom platform, and responses back after, responses to meditations, what parts did you notice? What was it like for you to do that? Are pretty expansive. So people will have all kind of different experiences, and I would like to share to everyone, no matter what your experience is inside, it's not right or wrong. I mean, it is what your system needs you to see. So if you didn't find a critic or you couldn't stay with my voice, that doesn't mean that you didn't have an internalized experience and got to know some of your parts, or at least met them.
I think that's well said. I think our wish list would really be that people could take those 3 hours and really have a number of reflection points where they just check inside and notice what parts are coming up and how do they tend to view their own body and other people's bodies. Maybe have a little bit of a map of some of the more present polarizations in their system.
I'm wondering what you're thinking the benefits will be that people will walk away with.
More compassion for the complexity.
Mhm.
You know, I think this, tend to have, because of the burdens our culture places on bodies, these very linear, calories in, calories out. I just have to work harder. There's a certain way to be, in our bodies that's really not achievable for most people, right? So to have more compassion, not only for the parts that come up around the issue of our bodies, but also maintaining them. Like I said, a lot of work goes into the care and feeding of our bodies, and I think we don't really a lot of times recognize that, with a lot of appreciation and compassion for the different parts that have to step up and do work that they might not want to, or the parts that have to relax when things aren't going as they would like for example, when we're aging, or in this pandemic when we don't have access to the things that usually keep us feeling grounded and more connected to our bodies. I think that's so more compassion
Mhm.
and right, flexibility, I think, is what I would hope people can get from this.
Mhm.
I'd really also like, it's really ambitious, but I think because it's only 3 hours, but to really, really be considering what it's like for us as a culture to be walking around with parts that are constantly braced, in the sense of there's something inferior um, or not okay with me for not being a certain way, for my body being imperfect, for my eating not being whatever perfect is for people.
The ideal, we have an ideal in our mind of what we should look
Mhm.
like. And I think even as professionals, we have an ideal of what we should look like or be like as we're trying to help other people. And sometimes we're not that. We're not what society has deemed as the ideal way for us to be in that role. Because not all therapists work with eating, and a lot of therapists have their own food related parts or body related parts. And so helping them to have more compassion for themselves around whatever this ideal is that we're supposed to be and look like, and how we behave. I was in line at a grocery store, and a person I knew was ahead of me, and they had a salad and a clamshell and a large candy bar, and they saw me and instantly took the candy bar to the other side and said, "I'm not going to eat all of this." And I just felt so bad. And there was a part of me that got mad. It's like, don't put that on me. I'm not your keeper, but that happens for us that are in the field, and people are always like, "You're eating that." And it gets hard to be in this helping profession around food and body, because then we have parts that feel judged, by the people we work with or by our colleagues. So,
Mhm.
yeah, as Jean said, greater compassion for that and to be able to hold the space to do the work.
Right. And to, to really help each other if we can shift
Yes.
out of this idea that there's a certain way to be and that we're not okay if we're not.
On behalf of myself and Adrienne, I just want to thank you both for providing this wonderful information and such incredible support to our community. Really looking forward to hosting your workshop on Saturday, the 23rd. And we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I'm looking
Yes,
forward to it.
us too.
Yeah. Anything else you want to say? Adrienne or Diana or Jean, anyone?
I'm excited actually for the opportunity and looking forward
Yeah.
to working with Jean again in this way and to work with you guys for the first time. And I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. In a way, I feel like 3 hours I know we have so much in our heads, right? So 3 hours feels like such a small period of time. But it's a beginning, and maybe I think one of the things that we could add is that we hope that this um, might be a launching off point for more discussion, right?
Mhm.
More thorough investigation of these issues that would help people feel more and more confident to be able to work with them with themselves, but also with their clients, right?
Mhm.
Okay.
And just briefly, how did the two of you connect and start doing this together?
I
See.
I was already level 2 trained and I was strongly considering a level 3, but I was really nervous about doing that because I didn't know Dick and I have parts that want to know, who my teacher is. And so I went to an intro locally, an intro all day with him and got the courage to go up afterwards and introduce myself and shared what I do. And the first words out of his mouth were, "You need to talk to my wife. Do you have a paper you can take her number down?" And so I called her and we had the longest conversation. We realized that we both did Anyasara yoga. I mean, there were so many connections in that first call. So we just took off from there.
Mhm. Right. And then we assisted together
Hmm.
at Kripalu, and then we decided to do the continuity program together, which is sort of like being in boot camp or like the military. You never forget that experience, not
Yes.
with 9 hours of recording, um, footage, but also really coming together and really putting our heads together as a dietitian and a psychologist, right?
Mhm.
Coming from two different angles, and we started collaborating on some clinical cases, but contributing to that program from these different professional vantage points was also really helpful and enriching. So, yeah, when we do talk about self-led eating and well-being, we do talk about working with your parts and burdening them is going to be the um, the most effective way to facilitate that practice. But the other piece is some more concrete things, like Diane. I think that you speak to very well in terms of creating the environment that facilitates self-led eating.
Mhm.
We would provide some detail about that in the workshop also.
I love the fact that both of you have an embodiment practice. And I just wonder if that's part of, some sort of setting the environment that you were just mentioning. Um,
Absolutely. I think that we would like to describe a little bit about what does go into a self-led eating and well-being practice, and certainly holding self-led intentions for what you'd like for yourself, like having an idea of how much movement at this point in my life, given my current external context, right now with the kids at home, with having very little me time, that's going to be different. In whatever moment you're in, checking in with what's viable, what's sustainable, and what feels good to my parts. So having an intention about how much movement, how much connection you need with other people, what's your food environment like right now. So in this period of time, it's become extremely different for many people. But what are the types of things that work for your system? Again, given your conditions, to prepare food or order it in or and then providing some sort of self-led structure for the meals and for the exercise so that you can then work with the parts that come up around working towards those intentions, right? So not getting into polarizations like I have to or I should, but on any given day checking in, does movement work for me today? Here's the time when I've created or made space for it. And then checking in and working to negotiate with all the parts that come up around doing it that way so that you can, again, have a lot of compassion. Some days you're going to follow through with your intentions. Other days it's not going to work because some part needs more rest or doesn't want to even have to deal with, cooking. And again, just being self-led as much as possible.
Right.
Thank you both so much. We're really thrilled to have you at IFSLA and look forward to experiencing this workshop for ourselves.
It's an honor. I'm looking forward to it.
Me too.